Welcome to this medical explainer. Today we're going to investigate a truly profound biological paradox. We're mapping out the exact interconnected network where powerful synthetic hormones collide with your gut ecology. We're going to explore how pulling just one metabolic lever can cascade into your long-term health span, your sleep, and your overall recovery. You see, we're not treating the human body as just a collection of isolated symptoms. We have to look at it as a single, incredibly complex system, connecting these synthetic hormones to your brain's reward pathways, to the literal trillions of microbes living in your digestive tract, and ultimately, to your long-term metabolic resilience. So, let's dive right into this by asking what I think is a crucial systems-level question. What actually happens to our microbial ecosystem when human digestion is chemically slowed to a crawl? When we intervene in metabolic disease with these powerful weight loss drugs, we are triggering a massive cascade of secondary effects. We are entirely altering the evolutionary environment of our gut. And to really understand the long-term implications for our biological resilience, we absolutely have to investigate the microscopic mechanisms at play here. Okay, to understand this, we first need to define the mechanism itself. We have to distinguish between synthetic GLP-1 receptor agonists, things like semaglutide and tirzepatide, and the endogenous GLP-1 that our own intestinal L cells naturally produce right after we eat a meal. Now, your naturally occurring endogenous GLP-1 has a half-life of just 1 to 2 minutes before an enzyme called DPP-4 comes along and breaks it down. But the synthetic versions? They are specifically engineered to resist that degradation. They stay active in your system for an entire week, which creates this unnaturally sustained hormonal signal that fundamentally rewires how your body handles energy. And here is where it gets absolutely fascinating. Notice how this chronic receptor agonism powerfully shifts the balance of neuropeptides in the brain's arcuate nucleus. It fundamentally turns down our biological drive to eat. If we look at this through a neuroscience lens, these medications are bypassing the stomach entirely to bind with receptors in the hypothalamus. They silence the orexigenic or appetite-stimulating hunger signals while heavily amplifying the anorexigenic or appetite-suppressing signals. We are literally rewiring the brain's reward pathways to create a profound, steady baseline where you just aren't that hungry. Let's literally map out the physiological cascade happening here. It starts with that receptor activation, moves to the inhibition of the vagal nerve, which then causes delayed gastric emptying, and finally leads to the starvation of the gut microbiome. By inhibiting vagal activity, these drugs physically relax the stomach. They dramatically delay the transit of food. Think of it like an ecological transit system that we are artificially slowing down, and that radically alters the fermentation dynamics for all those bacteria living downstream. It's a massive biological trade-off. We are achieving incredible glycemic control, but at the direct expense of starving the lower gut microbiome. And that systemic trade-off leads us to a stark clinical constraint. Look at this number. A staggering 53.6% of patients actually discontinue therapy within 1 year. Why? Well, it's heavily driven by severe gastrointestinal distress, which unfortunately often leads to rapid weight regain. When you stop that synthetic signal, your body's native GLP-1 is completely insufficient to maintain that altered physiology, and the hunger comes roaring back. This tells us something absolutely crucial. Pharmacology alone isn't a complete solution. It's just a bridge. And if that bridge collapses because a patient simply can't tolerate the side effects, the entire system fails. This is exactly why multidisciplinary clinical consensus, as highlighted by experts like Dr. Michael Camilleri, pictured right here, is shifting. Addressing gut health is no longer seen as optional. It is the foundational prerequisite for metabolic recovery. Managing gastrointestinal tolerance isn't just about making the patient comfortable. It's a vital clinical requirement for sustaining long-term metabolic homeostasis. Basically, if we want durable weight loss, high cognitive performance, and a robust health span, we literally have to solve the gastrointestinal puzzle first. Because when gastric emptying is delayed, the systemic trade-offs are severe across the entire biological network. As you can see outlined here, anywhere from 15 to 44% of patients experience clinical nausea, and up to a quarter of them suffer from chronic constipation. We are also seeing serious perioperative aspiration risks that demand really careful medical management. And because food sits in the stomach for so long, causing this prolonged distension, patients naturally just stop eating as much, which means they vastly reduce their intake of essential nutrients and dietary fiber precisely when their sluggish digestive tract needs that fiber the most just to keep things moving. Which brings us to a much deeper ecological investigation. How exactly does the severely reduced caloric and dietary fiber intake cascade into a totally starved microbiome? Think of your gut like a complex, thriving rainforest. Fiber is the rainfall. When you cut your food intake in half, you essentially cause a massive drought. The beneficial bacteria that rely on those indigestible plant fibers literally run out of food, causing a huge shift in microbial diversity. And when these fiber-starved microbes start to die off, the resulting systemic inflammation can paradoxically worsen the exact insulin resistance we're trying to treat, while simultaneously wrecking your sleep quality and your body's ability to recover. So to build a real defense against this ecological drought, we need to distinguish between different types of dietary fibers. This isn't just about eating more salads. It's about targeted nutritional therapy for an artificially slowed intestinal tract. We have to compare soluble, viscous fibers that form hydrating gels against insoluble fibers that add structural bulk. Insoluble fiber acts kind of like a broom, sweeping aggressively through the gut. But if you introduce it too quickly into a chemically slowed system, it can cause really severe gas and bloating. Soluble, viscous fiber, on the other hand, dissolves in water to form this soothing gel that softens stool and gracefully moderates glucose absorption. And this is where psyllium stands out as a highly effective, gold standard intervention. It is minimally fermented, it safely adds viscosity, and relieves that drug-induced constipation without causing that rapid gas production. It's honestly a marvel of biochemistry. Because it resists rapid fermentation by your gut bacteria, it stays intact all the way through your digestive tract, holding on to water. This softens the stool, preventing severe constipation, while shielding your highly sensitive vagus nerve from the gas-induced distension that triggers debilitating nausea. To practically apply this physiology, we can look at targeted demographics within an evidence-based clinical dosing framework. Women between 19 and 50 require a baseline of 25 grams of daily fiber to prevent constipation and support glycemic control. Men in the same age bracket need about 38 grams to add structural stool bulk and complement that GLP-1 satiety. But please, notice the key strategy at the bottom. For all adults, gradual titration. You literally cannot jump from 10 grams to 38 grams while on a medication that is paralyzing your stomach. You have to increase it very gradually to avoid worsening nausea, giving your gastrointestinal tract time to adapt. But, fiber is really only part of the story. The true magic happens when we zoom in on the specific apex predators of this microbial rainforest, like Akkermansia mucinifera. As you can see, it naturally makes up only about 3% of a healthy adult microbiome. But this is where the science gets truly mind-blowing. Most bacteria eat the food that you consume. Akkermansia is completely different. It's an ecological specialist that literally eats the mucus lining of your own intestine. Now I know, eating your intestinal mucus sounds like a bad thing, right? But it's actually incredible. By safely acting as the primary mucin-degrading bacterium, it essentially forces your body to produce even more mucus, which actively strengthens your intestinal barrier function. This prevents toxic liposolysaccharides, or LPS, from leaking into your bloodstream. And as a byproduct, Akkermansia produces short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. This butyrate doesn't just signal satiety, it actually crosses the blood-brain barrier to reduce neuroinflammation, supporting high cognitive performance and deep sleep recovery, while preventing the systemic LPS leakage that drives age-related insulin resistance. This is exactly why low levels of this specific bacteria are intrinsically linked to poor metabolic health. And the molecular communication happening here is just staggering. Akkermansia secretes a specific P9 protein that docks directly onto ICAM2 and TLR2 receptors on your host L cells. Why? To powerfully trigger your own body's endogenous GLP-1 secretion. Think about that continuous feedback loop for a second. You have a bacterium in your gut that secretes a protein which talks directly to your human intestinal cells, commanding them to release natural GLP-1. It is a built-in biological weight loss and glucose control mechanism that we can absolutely optimize. When we look at emerging therapeutics, the combination of pasteurized and live strains represents the absolute frontier of longevity science. Pasteurized strains utilize the heat-stable Amemac 110 protein to effectively activate those L cell receptors. Meanwhile, live strains actively metabolize mucin and generate those amazing short-chain fatty acids. So the pasteurized, technically dead bacteria still contain the exact key needed to unlock the GLP-1 receptor on your cells. But the live bacteria act as a continuous biological factory. Utilizing both approaches creates a really profound synergistic intervention for maximum metabolic benefit. Ultimately, what we are constructing here is a continuous pharmaconutritional feedback loop. Synthetic GLP-1 receptor agonists are the acute clinical risk escalation. They are the powerful intervention we use to reverse a disease state. But targeted dietary fiber and prebiotics, they are the foundational, permanent maintenance strategy. They rebuild the gut-brain axis to ensure you have metabolic resilience long after the pharmacotherapy ends. We use the medication to reset the system while simultaneously rebuilding the microbial ecology so your body can sustain its own natural hormone production and prevent that rapid weight regain. So, I'll leave you with this final, highly provocative thought to continue your own investigation. As we master these interconnected biological networks, as we dial in our sleep, our recovery, and our gut health, could restoring true microbiome ecology eventually eliminate the need for synthetic GLP-1s altogether? If we can cultivate the exact bacteria that command our bodies to produce our own appetite-suppressing hormones, we might just be looking at the true future of metabolic medicine. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions and keep exploring the science.